Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. This is Reservations, and I'm Rain Whalen.
And I'm Banksy.
I don't know why that just tickled me more than the other ones. I guess because, you could be. We don't know what he looks like.
That's right. Spoilers, he's not British after all.
So, you're who Post Malone was talking about in Into the Spider-Verse?
Oh. You got it.
I think it's funny. I think it's funny that they reuse that line in Across the Spider-Verse. I think it's a Banksy. Because that's Post Malone.
Yeah, Posty.
Yeah, and I just think it's funny that they reused it in Across the Spider-Verse.
They're probably going to randomly
here. I know, it better be in Beyond the Spider-Verse, otherwise I'm going to be mad.
I don't know if we'll live long enough to see it.
I know, since it's been indefinitely delayed.
Yeah.
Which is kind of bullshit, because I need the conclusion of that story yesterday.
It kind of seems like the Jeff Nichols film Bike Riders is also going to... I don't know when that's coming out now.
Wasn't that supposed to come out in November?
Yeah, and it's gone. It's nowhere now, so I don't know what's going on.
I remember seeing the trailer for that, and I was like, oh, hey, Austin Butler. He's not talking like Elvis.
And Tom Hardy.
I'm sold. Yeah, and it's fucking Tom Hardy.
Before we get started, he does these, I don't know if it's a show for the BBC or if it's just something he does on the side or if it's just YouTube videos. But
where he reads children's books?
He reads children's books, right? With his dog, usually. And it's just a compilation of him introducing himself, just like, hi, I'm Tom, you know? And I texted Zach, I go, man, if I ever meet this man, Haley better pack her bags. Because she's standing right there. I love you, honey. I'm sorry. Zach.
Yeah.
So Ken's is in trouble too, apparently.
And also before we get started, did Zach get on to you about the whole what you mentioned in Sicario, or which was it that you were like, he's gonna get on to me if I don't mention it?
No, because I did mention it, so I saved myself.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
the wrath of Zach.
That's right.
It would be more like, hey, why didn't you say that, dude?
Well, he would have texted me like, this was really good, but he's very compliment sandwich. So he's like, hey man, it was really good. I really like this. You forgot this, but overall it was really good. Or whatever,
That's why Zach's the best. We love you, Zach.
He's basically our consultant for quality control. He's doing fine. He's doing a fine job.
Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. So, dude, I finished this movie today, by the way. I slacked off again. And you know what? It's going to be something... I don't know if I've admitted this on mic or not. You were right. That movie was not what I was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so much more
than
I could have ever hoped it was.
So, for context, today we are discussing The Place Beyond the Pines, a Derek Cianfrance film. People may know him from directing Blue Valentine. And I think The Light Between the Oceans, which I did not see. But I saw Blue Valentine. I loved that. So,
well, this was the first movie of his I've ever seen. Definitely gonna check out Blue Valentine now, because I've heard...
Yeah, you'll like Blue Valentine.
I've heard so much great things about it, and it's got our boy in it. It's got Ryan in it. Yeah.
Now, when I warned you about that, it was like I wanted to tell you so bad. I'm like, hey man, Gosling's not in the whole thing. You know what I mean?
I'm glad you didn't say that. I think it would have ruined it for me, because, to be perfectly honest, when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, Gosling? Like, here we go. Like, bro, because the trailer makes it seem like he's in the whole fucking movie.
Right. And in a way, he is in the whole movie. But
which we'll get to,
Right.
because I did watch those 2 videos,
Okay, great.
and
Yeah.
thankfully now Fat Pastorain remembered to credit the Cinefix video in the Sicario. So
Okay, good.
hopefully Future Rain remembers, now that I've said it early, to credit those 2 videos.
Yeah.
But yes, in a way, Ryan Gosling is in the whole movie.
Yeah.
Um,
But when I saw it, I think it was in the theater. I like to think that I saw it in the theater. From what I remember, anyway. It blew me away, and I was also just struck by the structure of it. That it's 3 parts, right?
and it
Um,
really is almost like a 3-act play.
and I only have one problem with it, and we'll get to it.
Okay.
This movie is great, except this one thing. And yeah, we'll talk about that. I wonder if you had the same thought I did, but anyway, Place Beyond the Pines.
Well, before you do that, do you want to know why I chose this movie?
Why?
Because this is going to be another video for Future Rain to credit.
Okay.
There's a YouTuber I really like. I think I've shown you some of his videos, called Binging with Babish, where he recreates food from TV and film.
Mhm.
And he did one over The Place Beyond the Pines. It was the garbage plate that is very briefly mentioned towards the tail end of the movie,
Mhm.
when Bradley Cooper's getting ready for his district attorney run. Where one of his people says, "Oh, and you're going to have the garbage plate," and that's all it said. And Babish made this whole video about it, and to be honest, it looked really good.
Okay.
Now, would I recreate it? No, I don't have that kind of time. But it looked good, and I was like, man, what is this? What is this Place Beyond the Pines movie? What is this? And I looked it up, and I was like, because he showed the clip. He usually shows the clip of where the inspiration's coming from.
Mhm.
So I knew Bradley Cooper was in the movie. And then I looked it up and was like, oh, Ryan Gosling. Oh, Ava Mendes. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's where it stopped.
Okay.
So this literally was a first watch. But what's interesting is this movie was always kind of in the back of my head. And so when we were prepping this season, I was like, you know what? Now's the time to finally watch this movie.
Cool.
So there we go.
So Place Beyond the Pines. It is the story of Luke and Romina. Luke is sort of, and also Avery, and also Jason, and also whatever his name is.
AJ.
AJ, thank you. And also AJ. So, story initially follows Luke reconnecting with Romina. He is traveling with a carnival as a motorcycle act, where they get in the round cage and the motorcycles all ride in the cage, which is pretty exciting. It's pretty cool. They're called Handsome Luke and the Heartthrobs, which I really liked. And when he reconnects with Romina after sleeping with her a year prior, he finds out that she had gotten pregnant and had a child. And so now he feels like he needs to stick around, and he wants to stick around, right? Luke wants purpose, and he needs something to tether him, to someplace stable, right? He ends up meeting Robin. Robin owns a repair shop, and so he works with him for a while until he decides that he needs to make more money. Sorry, my cat's going crazy. That he needs to make more money, right? And so Robin suggests that they start robbing banks. Robin says he's done it before. As long as you do it not too many times, as long as you're smart about it, you can get away with it. You'll be fine. Keep in mind, this part takes place in the 90s. So
yeah, we'll get there.
And so Luke, they devise a plan. Luke decides to move forward with robbing banks. They come up with this idea that he will do it on motorcycle, ride into a cube truck. Cube truck goes away. He gets off scot-free. Done and done. After a while, Luke starts getting more money, starts wanting to provide for Romina. However, Romina has moved on. She has Kofi, and she lives with him at his house with her mother and Jason, their child. And Luke keeps trying to insert himself within this family because that's what he wants. He wants family, he wants stability. And unfortunately, he, steps on some toes doing so, gets in an altercation with Kofi, gets arrested. Once he gets bailed out, he gets greedy, wants to do 2 banks in one day. It goes wrong. He gets in a police chase, and eventually Officer Avery shoots and kills Luke. Now it's Avery's story.
Yep.
Avery is a rookie cop who had gotten out of law school, went from law to being a police officer. Avery feels he is better than everyone else, I feel.
Yeah.
And not only is he dealing with the grief or the shock or the implications of shooting and killing a person, but now he's having to deal with police corruption within the police department. He rats on some cops. He gets promoted. And then 15 years later, we have the 2 sons. We have AJ, which is Avery's son, and then we have Jason, which is Luke's son. They end up going to the same high school. They end up becoming kind of friends. I would say frenemies.
Yeah.
And things start to, like that video beautifully put it, things start to echo, right? Things start to mirror. Things start to shadow what is going on with their fathers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Luke ends up, also getting in legal trouble and burglarizing a pharmacy and getting caught with narcotics. And eventually he finds out that Avery is the one who killed his dad. He finds out, confronts Avery, steals his wallet, his money, and then, as to not be a burden on anyone and as to sort of escape and to sort of be a free spirit, he runs away, buys a motorcycle, and then drives off in the distance, and that's Place Beyond the Pines.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, and I yada yada through a lot because we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
So what I like most about this film is that it was really, it was a really brave decision. I wouldn't say brave decision. It was a risky decision doing this chronologically.
I would agree.
Because we're having to piece things together afterward,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of understand the point and to understand what Cian France was trying to achieve and trying to convey with how he shot the film and how these stories interconnect without relying on flashbacks and flash forwards and like stories dissolving into each other.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's more powerful chronologically than it would be the other way, right?
I agree. I feel like the movie would have still been really good had we gotten, the 1997, then it converting into Avery's story, and then 15 years later kind of interwoven with flashbacks and flash forwards.
Mm.
I think it still would have been a good film, but I feel like telling it chronologically makes it a better film.
Mhm.
Because we do see what Derek was trying to convey, which is these men, these 2 men, their actions, their consequences affect their sons.
Yeah. Well, and everyone around them, really.
Yeah.
Not only themselves, but everyone. right?
Mhm.
Um, and okay. Speaking of consequences, this is a great transition into Luke, played by Ryan Gosling. And
Yeah.
this piece, and I was telling Haley about this when she was sitting with me at the beginning of this movie. Um, a little tidbit about the behind the scenes that I love was when talking with the makeup artists and in the wardrobe department. Gosling said, "I want a face tattoo." Okay, like I know
Really?
I'm going to be
That was
covered
his
in them,
decision?
but I want one on my face. I think it'd be really cool, right? And so
That's so funny.
they put the dagger on him, on his cheek, and after shooting a few scenes, he was like, "Listen, man, like I think it was a mistake for the face tattoo. I think it's too much. Can we take it off and reshoot?" And San Fran said, "No. You see how you regret doing the face tattoo? So does Luke. Luke regrets getting a face tattoo." And so from then on, Gosling and San Fran sort of saw that Gosling was being a little more reserved, less confident. Um, he doesn't have um, that charisma that he usually has on screen, right? He's sort of pulled back a little bit because he's so self-conscious about his face tattoo, right?
Mhm.
And I thought that was brilliant, and it was a complete mistake, right? I mean, it was
Yeah.
not planned at all, and I like that. So that decision affected his performance, and in a really cool way. I really liked that little tidbit.
Yeah, like, that is interesting, especially considering, like, if you see one of my favorite Ryan Gosling movies, The Nice Guys,
Mhm.
yeah, he's so charismatic. When it's just him in the scene, he steals the scene.
Oh, and
But
everything he does, he's so captivating. Like when he even in a movie where he says almost nothing, like in Only God Forgives, you're still transfixed by him,
mhm,
or in Drive, which are both uh, Winding Refn films, but still, um, he's just so captivating. But in this, I think even without knowing the little behind the scenes story, you can still kind of tell that he's not full Gosling, or he's not being very confident. Uh,
yeah. Well, and like you just said, uh like it added to the character of Luke because we almost immediately we we grow to have an attachment to Luke,
mm,
you know, because we can see throughout all of his interactions that he does really care for Romina. He cares for Jason. He wants to be present. He wants to have this active presence. As he says, I didn't really know my father. Look how I turned out. I don't want that to happen to him. Um, and we really sympathize with him, which is almost all the more heartbreaking when, in a matter of a few scenes, we watch it all crumble away from him.
mhm, yeah.
You know,
Um, yeah, like I feel that Luke is, again, like I mentioned in the synopsis, that he is just like desperate for normalcy, for stability,
Mhm.
right? And so
Absolutely.
when he sees Romina again, of course, that's, he's drawn to Romina. But once he finds out that she had a child, then I mean, that's it. That's his ticket to stability. That's his ticket to normalcy, or at least, as close to it as he can get. And
Hmm.
unfortunately for him, Kofi's in the picture. Mahershala Ali, again, incredible, right?
Yeah. Shout
As
out.
always.
Yeah.
And it's sort of weird because, like, watching the film, you, I always find it weird when it's like, oh, that's right, Romina's sort of like stringing Luke along. You know what I mean? Because Romina is like having a relationship with Luke while also being with Kofi, right? So she's not like a great
Yeah.
person either. But um,
Yeah, I found, to be honest, I found that a little strange, that she, I mean, they hook up, well, not
yeah,
essentially, they hook up, and then, he assaults Kofi, which 100% Luke was in the wrong for that.
yeah,
But then it's like, she can't call him crazy when, she's kind of two-timing Kofi,
right.
Kofi's really the victim here in this scenario.
Definitely. I mean, I really do feel bad for Kofi. Yeah, I mean,
Also,
obviously you have reacts for sure.
yeah, but also, I meant to look this up. I'm assuming it was a purposeful choice to cast Ava Mendez to play opposite her husband.
I can't remember if they were together at this time yet. Um, I know
Uh,
that I read that Gosling recommended Mendez for the role, but
Wait, here, let's look it up.
I don't know if they were together at the time.
Let's take a look. They have been married since 2011.
Okay, so yeah, it was around that time.
So yeah, let's see.
This came out in 2012.
They started a relationship while production was going on.
There it is.
So this movie got them together.
So there you go. So right, Luke. I always find it interesting how when Luke meets Robin, which by the way, Ben Mendelsohn, I mean, there's nothing more you can say. He's a force of nature. I love Ben Mendelsohn in everything he's ever done. And when they start robbing banks, which is a really interesting part of the movie, there's the way Robin explains to him how it can be done. Okay, he's saying, you don't even really need a gun. You can just go with a note and then get in and out of there, and you're done. You're out. It's over, right? But Luke chooses to make a spectacle out of it, which is really interesting because, again, Robin told him to do the exact opposite, right?
Yeah.
So I haven't really figured out what that means, or what I think that means. That he decided to, number one, use a gun, number two, make a huge scene, and scream and yell and physically move people around and threaten and all of that. It's so bizarre that he would choose to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue maybe having almost a lifetime in a traveling circus and
Sure.
theatricality.
Yeah.
This is all he knows.
You're right, because I think there's something to that, because at the very beginning, his tracking shot, it's a show. It's like it is a spectacle what he's doing and what he does for a living, right? It's all theatrics, and man, the way that comes back too with those shots behind his shoulder there, those are awesome. The way that comes back with Jason, but you're right. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just him being a performer that he needs to make it like
Yeah.
sorry, super over the top.
Well, and it makes sense because prior to the assault on Kofi, Luke was very much kind of giving me, at least, how he was being presented, the impression that he doesn't really want to hurt anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he's like, I can make this into a big thing. I can be very theatrical and still not hurt anyone.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why he chose the gun.
Yeah, maybe he thought he needed to, right? Like, no one's going to take me seriously if I walk in there with a gun. Or without a gun, with like a note, and just like softly ask for money. Like, that's not going to work. So I need to go in there, and make a scene. And and then I'll get out of there and we're done. Maybe that's what it is.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah,
maybe it could be the opposite. Maybe he just didn't want to take Robin's advice at all and he wanted to do it his way.
yeah. Maybe he already, once Robin decided to tell him about to rob banks, he already had it in his mind how he was going to do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a shot that I want to talk about specifically, and because we're on this section of the movie, there's a shot of Ben Mendelsohn that is gorgeous. This shot of him. It's after Gosling gets out of jail, is bailed out, and he's telling him, to quit, to not do the bank robberies anymore, and that's when he says the famous line, right? But it's like blue light, and his face is dirty, and he's got the cigarette, and I just think it's a gorgeous shot. I don't know, you know what I mean? He looks that face of his is just so captivating, and
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you know the shot I'm talking about, but it's just like, whoa, dude! Like that is a very that's a movie quality face right there. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, man. You said it already, but man, Ben Mendelsohn is the
Mendelsohn.
best.
Yeah,
He plays such a good sub villain in The Dark Knight Rises.
yeah,
I say sub villain because he's not the main villain. He's like the third tier level down villain, but he still makes a good villain. He
yeah.
also makes Gorillaz used him on their album Humans. He's kind of like an ethereal presence. He like talks in like interludes. And I
That's
didn't
really
realize it was him until I watched their documentary that they made to kind of coincide with that album, and it has a little blurb that says the voice of Ben Mendelsohn, and I was like,
Ben
oh my
Mendelsohn.
god, that makes so much sense. But yeah, I do remember the shot you're talking about, and it's a very striking shot,
Yeah, right.
almost like this is the Derek. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, so I'm not going
Cian
to.
France. That's fine.
Was almost trying to put him in almost like the shadow a little bit, or like a silhouette.
Yeah,
That Luke is sort of like, I'm not listening to you. I'm
it
going to do
was
it
it
anyway.
was very noir. I really liked that shot,
Yeah.
and it's one of the things I think about. If you were to say "Place Beyond the Pines," that's what I would think about. Um, I'm not sure why. I think it's just such a cool shot, and I had to bring it up. Okay, so what I love about this first section, right,
Mm-hmm.
is not only Luke, trying so hard to get what he wants, right, which is this
Mm-hmm.
normalcy, but it's the decisions he's making in order to do so, or not good decisions. They're bad decisions, right?
Yeah.
And this is sort of going to set up the whole premise of the film, which is these bad decisions are going to have consequences that last a generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And ripple out to affect other people too, not just him and his son directly just through, but everyone else, right?
Yeah.
Because that decision will now affect Avery,
Yeah.
and affect Avery and his generational line as well, which is so fascinating. So, for starters, the police chase shot incredibly. I don't know how they did it. I thought
Mm-hmm.
it was so cool. Very dynamic. They used um, just like scenes from Cops as examples for
Really?
when they were doing the choreography and doing the shot, like mapping out the shots. And they're pretty dynamic and they're pretty raw, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
just handheld in the car, and then the foot pursuits are all handheld and shaky and seem pretty real. So um, I like that. And again, the one of the reasons why Luke gets caught is he's not in the right headspace because he forgot his sunglasses, and that becomes very important later. That he forgot his sunglasses. But again, Luke is like the Luke is the center of all of this, right? So when he breaks into
Mhm.
that house, lets the people go, whatever, and he's talking to Romina, um, we get our first our real sort of kicking off point for Avery, which is him shooting Luke first, right?
Yes, which he 100% shot first. I rewound that a little bit.
Yeah,
And yeah, he shot first.
it's not even up for debate. I mean, he did shoot first, right?
Yeah.
It's clear, he's a rookie, he's nervous, he's scared. He, breaks the door down without checking to see if it was locked first, and probably mistakes the phone for a gun and shoots Luke, right?
Mhm.
Um, and this now, I love that, again, when you're watching this film for the first time, you're not ready for this complete shift in story,
Yeah.
right? Um, you're sort of shocked that our main character is dead. Now what? you know? Um,
Well, and as I was watching the even though I was enjoying everything that I'd been seeing up until that point, I was like, I thought Bradley Cooper was in this movie because he and Ryan are billed
mhm,
first.
yeah,
So I was like, where's Bradley in all this? And then we see him and I'm like, oh, cool. I was like, so is he gonna now like is this gonna be like a this wasn't the movie I thought of, but for whatever reason, this is the movie my brain just went to, like a shooter situation, where Mark Wahlberg is trying to get out of town and like,
oh, okay,
you know.
yeah.
But I was like, is that what this movie's about to become? Like, is Bradley Cooper just going to like try to track him down the rest of the movie? Um, and then the shot happens, and I literally thought to myself, I was like, wait, are we about to now focus on Bradley Cooper?
Yeah.
And yes, we are.
Yeah, and then it becomes a story about Avery. And now Avery is dealing with, the repercussions of killing someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I love is like in the scene where he's at the therapist office, because cop movies have taught me that when you shoot someone you have to go to therapy. I'm not even sure if that's true, or if that's like mandatory. I don't know, but movies make it seem mandatory. So he's in the therapist office and he says something so significant um, that is really the main theme of the film is these consequences for these actions, these decisions, um, and relationships between fathers and sons. And so
Mm-hmm.
he says that he has a hard time looking at his 1-year-old son because he knew that Luke had a 1-year-old son
Mm-hmm.
and that he took that father away from that son. And
Yeah.
so this now will affect his relationship with his son moving forward for
Mm-hmm.
the rest of their life, or at least up until we catch up with them, right?
Yeah.
Which again, at the time you're watching it, you don't know how significant that is, but um, again, San France is creating this story where thinking about it and reflecting on what we were just shown, like everything is connected and everything matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, of course, we get two of my favorite cameos in the film, which is Bruce Greenwood and Ray
I was
Liotta.
just about to. I was about to say
Um,
we got to talk about Bruce Greenwood
yeah,
again.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, dude, I was so happy when he showed up. I was like, "Hey!"
And I think that year, if I'm not mistaken, and I probably am, he visited two main characters in hospitals that year because he was in this film and he was also in Flight, and he did the same thing in
Oh,
Flight where he goes to he's like the head whatever of the FAA or someone, and he goes to Denzel's hospital room after the plane crash to interrogate him about the plane crash. And so, so that was so funny that those happened so close to each other. Um,
yeah, that's really good.
but again, and I like how we with these interactions with people with Bruce Greenwood first, um, and then with the therapist later, that you kind of see what kind of person Avery is, right?
Mhm.
Um, he's very pragmatic, right?
Well, and
Um,
he's definitely the smartest person in the room, or at least he thinks he is.
he definitely thinks he is. Yes. Because when, and I love, again, Bruce Greenwood, incredible.
Yeah.
Because there's that moment where they have this little disagreement about procedure, about letting yourself known, right? Um, Avery goes, well, I let myself known when I walked in the house. He goes, I understand that, but did you do it again? Because sometimes you can't assume someone heard you, right? And Avery comes back with, I let myself known like we were trained to do. And Bruce Greenwood gives this little like, all right, like,
Yeah.
like, okay, fine. Because again, Avery is technically a lawyer. And and so, he's Avery's responding to him with, well, that's not what the law says. I did what the law requires, right?
Yeah.
Instead of what was probably the right thing to do, right?
Mhm.
Um, but again, in the moment, he's frazzled, he's scared, he's nervous, um, and and again, when they're talking about was the door locked, right? You broke open the door, but why? Did you check if it was locked? He's like, yeah, I must have, you know, and they keep going back and forth on this stuff, and you start to realize that Avery is going to do whatever it takes to save himself, despite or to get ahead, or to get what he wants,
Mhm.
despite other people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um. Yeah. Uh. I do love the whole. I do love the whole the interaction during that with this whole like, what do you want me to say?
Yeah,
And Greenwood is just like, don't fuck with me.
yeah.
Like, just answer the question. Like, he shot you first, then you shot. Like pop pop, and he was just like yeah, sure. That's how I kind of took it. That he was just like, if that's what you want me to say, that's what I'm going to say. You know.
Well, I think Bruce Greenwood is sort of trying to hold his hand along this. He's like, listen, you answer these the way that I'm telling you to answer these, you're going to be just fine, right? Or
Yeah.
he's giving him leading questions, and I think at first Avery's sort of wanting to tell exactly what happened and telling the truth. I think he's starting to pick up on sort of, and then you did this, and he's like, yes, and then I did that, right? Which sort of like Bruce Greenwood is, quote, a good guy within the police department,
Hmm.
right? Um, he's not a corrupt or dirty cop, right? I think
Hmm.
that Avery is sort of picking up. I think this is a clue, or maybe I'm reaching, right? Maybe I'm reading too much into it, and it was just a great performance with two great actors, right? Um,
I mean, it's probably definitely that.
with dynamic writing, right?
Yeah.
Which it is, obviously, but it might be a hint of what's to come later with the police corruption, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I think because Avery lied about the shooting to save himself, right? And it really probably wouldn't have been that big of if I'm being honest. I don't know anything about police procedures. I don't know anything about this stuff, so I'm very naive when it comes to this. But I think if he had told the truth that he shot second, I think they would have protected him anyway, and it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
Um, but the fact that he made that decision to lie and to say that I shot second after he shot me in the leg or whatever, then from then on, he's wanting to sort of atone for that, meaning
Hmm.
that, of course, the police corruption he immediately fell into was like top tier police corruption. Like,
Yeah.
these weren't like softballs, right? That he was getting thrown with the police corruption. He went in the deep end immediately. but he wasn't going to
Well,
stand for any of it because, again, I think he's trying to atone for what he's already done.
yeah, and especially with, and I just thought of this, and I'll circle back to it.
Sure.
Ray Liotta, who is sort of like the head of the corruption within his department, takes him over to Ava Mendez's house, and we're like, yeah, we're trying to find the money that Luke gave you, and of course she's trying to play innocent, which actually I think she wasn't. I think she was being genuine. I think she didn't know where the money came from, and I don't think she wanted to
No,
know.
she didn't. She knew she had money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he gave it to her. But she didn't know where it came from. I think she's now starting to understand that it's probably for sure the
Stolen.
robberies is where he
Yeah.
got it, because that had already come out of the news, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Avery's already out of the hospital, so that's already been like a week at least, right?
Yeah. And so, but, so they go over there to find the money, but to keep it for themselves. But this is what I was going to circle back to. Do you think she wouldn't have noticed? Like what was their game plan here? Like, they're like, oh no, she's clean. Like, oh, we didn't find
Well,
anything.
it's not that they were hoping she wouldn't notice. It was they know that they can steal it and she can't do anything about it. What's she going to say?
Mm,
To who?
right, right,
Right? And
right.
so
Yeah,
it's the fact that they can just take it, right?
yeah.
Um,
But yeah, but circling back to your whole Avery wanting to atone, he even goes as far as to try to give his portion of that money back
yeah,
to Romina, and telling her, like, that, I'm not here as a cop. I'm just here as a man, like, just trying to give you this money back. Because I think he felt like if she took it, he could it could make up for a little bit.
yeah, and yeah. There's also that moment when they're in the when they're in their house looking for the money. There's that moment where Avery holds Jason, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's that moment that he's trying to comfort Jason, like don't wake him up, right?
Mm-hmm.
To sort of shield him from what's going on around him. And that even is an early echo because that's mirroring what Gosling did. Gosling, whatever. That's what Luke did after he hit Kofi with the wrench, right? He immediately picked up Jason, comforted him, shielded him from what's going on around him, right? And took him to a safe
Mm-hmm.
place, right? And
Yeah.
they're both doing that, and coincidentally with the same child, with Jason, right?
Right.
Which I really liked that moment. Um, and so yeah, so now we're Avery is very I wouldn't say narcissistic, I would say egotistical, because
Okay.
he immediately goes into the chief's office and is like, listen, I don't think I'll be good out in the field, but if you make me a lieutenant, I'll be, it's like, dude, you just got out of the academy anyway. Like, what are we doing? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, yeah, like, that's not how this works. Like, even I know how that's not how this works. You have to work your way up
Yeah.
in, uh, and prove that you can do the job. Uh,
Yeah. So it
and
was
then,
pretty nuts.
well, and then he does the same thing to Bruce Greenwood, after he gets his dad's advice on how does he deal with this corruption, because I
Mhm.
don't want to be a part of this. Because for Avery's faults, he is a good person.
Yeah.
Yes, he's egotistical, and yeah, he definitely thinks he's the smartest person in the room. But, or here, let me rephrase: he's a decent person. Maybe
Yeah.
not a
And
good person, but he's a decent person.
he does want to eliminate police corruption. He does want to do the right thing. But again, despite everyone else that gets in his way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because, when he goes to Bruce Greenwood, he tells him, I'll give you this, but I want full immunity and I want to be assistant DA. And Bruce Greenwood's like, what are you talking about? I can't just make you DA. And he's like, well, if he pretty much said, well, you better figure it out
Yeah.
because that's what I want. And I kind of love the line that they wrote for Bruce Greenwood, like, I'll give you these things, but I won't shake your fucking hand.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, that's a
Because he's being basically
good,
blackmailed or bullied. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's crazy.
pretty much.
Yeah. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
And again, what I love about how the story is laid out for us is that we're establishing that Avery has a good relationship with his father, right? Who is a former judge.
Yep.
And so they have that connection not only with law enforcement, but just being close as father and son, right? Which now when we get to 15 years later, and we have AJ and we have Jason as high schoolers, which I guess they'd be 16 or 17 at this time. They're seniors, so I'm going to say 17.
Yeah, when Jason goes in for his felony, he says he's 17.
Okay. So they're 17 at this time. And now we've arrived at the thing that I don't like about this movie is AJ is a greaseball, and I don't understand why. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know where this thug attitude, because his mom is Rose Byrne. Like,
yeah,
where did this come from? Where did this this sort of ghetto hood thug Guido type personality come from? I don't understand.
Tony Soprano.
It's sort of it's almost enough to take you out of it because he's a cartoon.
Yeah, I also was kind of like, I don't really understand what. Well, and I like that. I like that Jason Dane DeHaan even says, like, what are you, from Staten Island or something?
Yeah, because
Like,
he's got that attitude. He's got that sort of je ne sais quoi, I guess. But I just don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't know why it was written this way. I would only hope that in the director's commentary he mentions it. I didn't have time to watch that, but I would just hope that he would go, oh yeah, I did this because of this reason.
Because of X, Y, and Z, yeah. Or what if he was like, no, the guy who came in and read it like that, and we're like, good enough.
That'll work. I know he doesn't talk like that for real because I've seen him in other stuff. So it's a decision.
Yeah. Yeah, I do find that interesting, especially because, circling back to the fact that his mom is Rose Byrne, when she tells him at Avery's dad's funeral, he wants to come live with you. I was kind of thinking about it, and I wonder if maybe it was a situation of she wanted him to go, that like she couldn't deal with.
I mean, I'm sure that's also true, but I think there's that scene in we're skipping through a lot. We'll circle back, but when they get arrested and when Avery goes to AJ's holding room, he mentions that you wanted to come live with me, you leave that kid alone, right? And he's not saying I didn't want it. He's not doing that. So I think it's legit that he did. But I agree that I wouldn't be able to handle this kid either. So I'm with Rose Byrne on this one for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
She has
circling back.
Also, I think it's Jennifer. Hold on.
It's Jennifer. It's Jennifer.
Okay.
Okay. So circling back to now, this is AJ and Jason's story. I also was like, wait, are they about to become best friends?
Yeah.
And yeah, I like your term that they become sort of frenemies. Like the friendship starts to kind of blossom, and then it just deteriorates
Yeah,
almost
because
immediately.
there is sort of an initial sort of camaraderie with, obviously, they like to skip class and get high, whatever, that'll bond anybody. Um, but there is this sort of um, this sort of combativeness, that's not a word, between the two of them. Um,
Hmm.
that a lot of it's AJ's fault because AJ's a bad person. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and I
yeah.
get it, right? I get why AJ is sort of troubled. His dad wants really nothing to do with him. His mom,
Hmm.
I'm sure is struggling. She's a single mom, right?
Hmm.
Because they are divorced. That is made abundantly clear. It's also made abundantly clear that's going to happen anyway, in Avery's story anyway.
Yeah.
Um, Rose Byrne gives an amazing performance in Avery's section, just by being sort of, I don't know, like she's not annoyed by everything, but she's sort of put off by it, or she's sort of like she doesn't like what it's turning Avery into, right?
Hmm.
She doesn't like what this decision has done to Avery and how he's behaving. I think that it's implying that he was a different person before.
Right,
Um,
right, right, right.
and anyway, so AJ and Jason. When it's sort of like you kind of have to suspend your disbelief a little bit when they do, like, not only do they go to the same school, but they gravitate towards each other immediately. I think that's sort of this, sort of it's almost like their fathers were connected, therefore it's inevitable that these two would also be connected.
Hmm.
Which I like. It's sort of this destiny, or the sort of, this these decisions have rippled into their inevitable um, meeting, or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and this section is where we get some of the coolest um, mirroring or echoing, right?
Hmm.
Especially with Jason. Jason is the main one we're getting these echoes with from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though this section is AJ and Jason's story, I like that we focus more on Jason.
Yeah.
Um, Also because again, Dane DeHaan is awesome as
Yeah.
Jason. Even though I really had to suspend that, like, there's no way he's fucking 17 years old.
They both weren't. They were both in their 20s
Yeah.
doing this. I could believe it way more with Dane DeHaan than I could this other guy.
Yeah, yeah. Dane is really lanky and he looks young in the face. Even now that he's like almost 40, he doesn't look 40.
Yeah, I just saw him in. I rewatched a little bit of Oppenheimer yesterday, and yeah,
That's right. He
he
is an
looks
Oppenheimer.
the same.
Yeah.
So um, anyway, so some of my favorites. Okay, um, after AJ, um, not AJ. I'm sorry. After Jason is asking more about his dad, right?
Hmm.
Um, Kofi takes him to the ice cream place, and it's the same
Hmm.
ice cream place that Luke takes him to when he's one, right?
Yeah.
It's so he can try ice cream for the first time, and so that I love this because that was such a wholesome, significant moment for Luke. Luke is, in dad mode at that time, and um, he's starting to become more comfortable with the idea, and not only comfortable with the idea because he wants it, he's comfortable with this is happening, like this is going to happen, this is sustainable, right?
Mhm.
And so when we get the flip side of that, um, I like that the difference is literally night and day because this portion happens in the nighttime instead. Um, and the mood is sort of different, and um, it's a little more somber, and but I like that it takes place in the same location, and even in the
Yeah.
same bench, um, with his other father figure, right?
Well, and and watching both those videos you sent me, it made me think like Kofi is being so sincere when he says, you know, he's not your dad. I'm your dad.
Right.
And
In a way, he's right.
in a way, yes, I agree. In a way, he is right. Kofi really, besides the glaring elephant of that Luke was killed, Kofi really has been there for Jason since the beginning. And I could see where the videos were saying how it doesn't land the way I don't think, the way that Kofi was intending it to land. Because, that's not what Jason really wants to hear.
Right.
Like, yes, I understand that you are my dad, but like, I want to know about my real dad.
And
Like, I want to know.
in a way, it's sort of like Luke is threatening him all over again. Luke is threatening Kofi by, it's like, I'm going to take this away from you, right?
Mhm,
And obviously, Kofi takes offense to that. And I would too, right? Um,
I agree.
and bringing Luke up again in this way, I think that Kofi is sort of like, Luke is now trying to take him away from me again by just him being brought up, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's threatening
And
that sort of, that um I don't know how to put it, but you know what I mean? Like it's
yeah,
yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and do you think that's maybe why he told Jason his dad's name? Like maybe if Jason looks into this and realizes what kind of a person his dad was, maybe he won't
Yeah,
he
maybe.
won't go further. You know, he'll still recognize me. I'm dad, and that Luke was just this guy.
But again, there's like this sort of this destiny, right?
Yeah.
That takes place with Jason because there's again the echoes of Jason robbing the pharmacy. Um, it's shot also in like the same way that the bank robberies were shot. Um,
I
and go ahead.
I was sorry. I don't. I want you to finish your thought. I was just gonna say I was not expecting him to rob that pharmacy.
Yeah,
It's just like, why is he there? He's going to get OxyContin. Like, why is he? And I was like, oh, he's
right.
gonna steal it.
Yeah, and again, I love that they're shot the same, um,
Mhm.
and they're mirroring one another. And even when he gets caught with the X, right? It was ecstasy was what it was. Um,
Yeah.
those hearings mirror each other too, right?
Hmm.
Um, and they're affecting the same people, which is so interesting. Um, in a way, because Luke being arrested affected Kofi and Romina also. Um, and so they weren't there, at the hearing with Luke, but it's still sort of the same impact. Um, that now Jason is affecting them as well. It's so
Yeah.
interesting. Um,
Yeah. But I also had this thought, but Luke didn't have a guilty DA who brought your felony down to a misdemeanor,
right.
because,
Yeah.
Avery, once Avery realized who it was, he was like, nope, get it down to a misdemeanor, get that kid home, you know?
That's a really interesting scene also where Avery finds out who he is, right?
Hmm.
Who that kid is, because he's been keeping tabs. Um,
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
and well, it's almost it's almost confirmed at the end, um, but I like how that plays because it's not like he didn't know immediately who it was. He's not keeping like super close watch on these people. He knows who they are, um, and he still feels really bad.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know. I like how Bradley Cooper plays that. Sort of like what was his name? You know, um, and we're like okay. And I even think no, it's fine. No, I'm mistaken. Um, I was like, do we even know who the
Okay.
kids are at that point? Um, or who Jason is at that point? I think maybe that's when we find out is during the hearing who Jason is. Um,
Yes. Yeah. That's when we find out.
and so that reveal is obviously a big deal. But we've ruined it here for you.
Oh no.
In multiple watchings ruins it for you because again I forgot that that's supposed to be the reveal, right?
Yeah.
Of who
Um,
Jason is.
but I do find it interesting that again these mirrors and these echoes, keep circling back on the boys, especially when they get into a fight. When Jason can't let it go once he realizes who AJ's dad is.
Mm-hmm.
And they get into a fight and AJ sorry. AJ just beats the piss out of him, dude. Like
And I don't know if you
and I
noticed
like that.
the blood on his face mirrors the blood on Luke's face when he fell out the window.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, oof. Like they're really like wanting the audience. Derek was really like, "Hey, remember that this is kind of what happened to his dad."
yeah.
Um but I not enjoyed. That's not the right word. I really liked the plot element of Jason buying a gun and taking Avery out to the woods. I I honestly felt like Jason wasn't going to do it. I think he took him out there as more of like a scare tactic.
Mhm.
But I think once Avery broke down and apologized, I think I felt like that was enough for Jason, where he was just kind of like, okay.
I don't think Jason realizes that that was what Avery needed. Avery needed to apologize. Avery needed to
Mhm.
say, I'm sorry. And Avery knew he needed to say it, but he never would have, right? Um,
Yeah.
Avery needed this catharsis of finally admitting fault and saying sorry and atoning for, what he's done or what he feels like he's done. And
Hmm.
Jason wanted this sort of quasi revenge. Um, and Jason is just confused and he's angry and he doesn't know where to put all of it. And so I think that's where he, has something to point his anger towards
Hmm.
at that moment in his life. And in doing so, this decision sort of sort of not fixes, that's not the right word. Sort of it atones Avery, right?
Hmm.
Avery is now able to let it go
Hmm.
and reconnect with AJ, right? They have now
Yes.
gone through something together that will bond them, right? That will get them
Hmm.
back on track. And you can see that at the end that AJ is, sort of now more, I don't know, he has more respect for his father, I guess, or can see that his father is a good person, um, and now Avery can now look at his son again, right?
Yeah.
Um, and finally give attention to AJ that he has been withholding, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
For 15
for
years.
15 years.
Yeah.
And that's sort of hinted at the end that that's where that's headed, right? We're headed
Yeah.
to fixing that relationship.
Yeah, and I like how subtle it is that AJ keeps smiling, but then he keeps trying to not smile, while
Mhm.
looking at his dad. Because I think you're right. I think he's kind of getting this newfound respect for his dad, and I think there's a part of him that maybe doesn't, like, who's trying to hold on, like, no, like, this guy's been arm's length with me my whole life.
Yep.
But then there's that part of him that's like, wow, I really respect my dad, and I just really like that he just keeps smiling because it's so effective, and nothing needs to be said, and we know what he means.
Yeah. Yeah. And then where Jason ends up is so interesting because it's not quite a super happy ending because he's, leaving his family behind. But he's
Mm-hmm.
finding who he is and he's trying to fill the void that Luke left behind, right? That
Yeah.
he needs to discover who that is within himself, right? And so that's where he goes. And just drives off in the distance. And then that's, of course, where we get one of my favorite uses of music in a film.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to Bonnie Bear. Because, yeah, dude. That, yeah, that song is rad. And I did not listen to it until I finished the movie.
I think if you had listened to it prior, you'd be waiting for it. And so, or you would already make associations with it. And I didn't want that. I wanted this just to be
Yeah.
clean for you.
But yeah, I really like, I'm pretty sure both videos that you sent me say it. I like, yes, it's sad that Jason essentially runs away from home and sort of becomes like his father, sort of like a drifter. But unlike Luke, as the videos say, that Jason gets to be free.
Yeah.
And that's something that Luke never really had. Even when he was in the carnival, he was not necessarily free. He
No.
was still kind of, trapped.
Sorry, that was me.
I got an email.
Yeah.
Uh, but I do like that, and I like that. It was just kind of like we watch him go off into the sunset,
Well,
and that's
it's the exact opposite of how the movie opens. The movie opens
Mhm.
with Luke riding into a cage, right? Where
Yeah.
Jason is riding off into open earth, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that's significant, right?
Yeah.
This is an oops, I forgot. We forgot. We completely skipped over Jason meeting Robin, and that's too important to skip over.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yes. Yeah.
because when Jason meets Robin, that's when a lot of mirroring happens. With him in the trailer, him picking up those sunglasses, and in the video, I think they mentioned that the patches on his shirt are to mirror the tattoos. I didn't quite get that, but it's whatever. I like it
Yeah.
regardless.
Neither did I.
I like the idea of it, but I didn't think that really resonated. But I just love their interactions, and I love that Robin still has such admiration for Luke and is happy to talk about him to anyone, let alone his son, right? Um,
Mhm.
and that Luke made such a positive impact on Robin, even though their last interactions were negative. Um,
Yeah.
so
Well, and I like that Robin also doesn't hold a grudge towards Luke. He remembers Luke fondly
yeah,
to Jason, like, your dad was one of the best. Like,
yeah,
one of the best. And not like, hey, your dad stuck a loaded gun in my mouth and threatened to shoot me.
yeah, no, And you can bring
Um,
it up.
but I think it's because he knew that I think he knew Luke at that point was desperate and chose not to hold a grudge.
Yeah, because Robin knew that this was the best thing for him was to try to stop him, right? Because he was
Mhm.
gonna, you know, he was gonna kill himself, or he was definitely gonna get caught, right? And so he's saving
Yeah.
him from himself, and in doing so, it tarnished their relationship, and he did it anyway. But at least he tried. He
Yeah.
didn't do it to be awful. He didn't do it to be mean. But he did it to save Luke, right? But yeah,
Hmm.
Luke was too driven, and Luke was too desperate.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, buddy, are you ready to wrap up?
I am. So for a first time, you liked it.
Oh, I loved it. It really resonated with me. I kind of wish I would have had the opportunity to show Ashley. Maybe after our year challenge is up and I can buy a physical copy of this,
Yeah.
I can show it to her. Because yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think she would really enjoy it and really enjoy this kind of like version of storytelling. Um, but yeah, it was awesome. I definitely need to see Blue Valentine now.
Yeah, definitely. It's really good. It's very sad, but it's very good. Uh, it's a unique take on a romance film for sure. Um, yeah, San Francis. He's a unique filmmaker for sure. He's very good. Again, I haven't seen the other one. Light Between the Oceans, I think, is what it's called. I haven't seen that, but yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
good job. We did.
Yeah. So, all right, buddy. So, what are we going to talk about next week?
That's a good question. Um. Oh man, I have a few. Obviously, I have options. Um. Let's see. We can do. Yeah, we can do this one. That'll be fun.
Okay.
Okay. So next week, we are going to be discussing Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth. Uh,
Oh,
next week.
it's oh, it's over here. I don't think anyone can see it. It may not be
I
in
think.
frame. Yeah, but right there. Uh, oh, dude, I have not seen this movie either.
That's okay.
But I do know the importance of it because again, it's Guillermo del Toro. Um, I, he using Doug Jones, of course. I know Doug Jones is in it. Um,
Doug Jones is amazing. I don't know if he's the voice of the fawn either. If he does, then he learned Spanish for it. So,
I don't think he
I
is.
don't
I
think
know
so
he's
either.
also like the hand creature
Yeah,
that everyone memes. I know Doug Jones is that.
yeah, he is.
Um, but yeah, dude, I'm so excited because I know this is part of the like a is it like an official trilogy that Guillermo announced
I
or
don't
was it
think
or
so.
is it just sort of like Criterion has made it a trilogy?
Well, I know they're all connected. I think they all have something to do with the Spanish Civil War. I know this definitely does. It's the backdrop of the film.
Yeah,
And so
because
is Devil's Backbone. I don't remember if Kronos has anything to do with the Spanish Civil War. Um,
yeah,
but this one definitely is. I mean, it's basically what he did for Pinocchio, having um, Italian fascism as the backdrop. The Spanish Civil War is the backdrop of this one.
okay,
So that's super exciting. This movie is amazing. Um, it's way better than the marketing let me believe. I think the marketing of this film I thought was misleading because there's sort of like, oh, it's this, um, this fantasy film that's sort of dark, right? And you're like, okay, sure. It's like a creature feature, and it's not. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
super
I
good.
want to say I remember seeing trailers for this and just being kind of like, oh, okay, and then having an appreciation for Guillermo del Toro, I was like, well, I'm gonna have to see it.
Well, and at the time
And
it came out, I was terrified of foreign films. I was like, I can't read a movie. That's crazy. I can
I
barely
can't
read.
read.
I can barely read a still piece of paper. How am I supposed to read a film with stuff going around? So
Uh, that's one of my favorite lines in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets when they take the polyjuice potion and he's like, "Why are you wearing glasses?" "Oh, reading. Didn't know you how to read."
that's right.
But yeah, I think that was the other thing too. When I first heard about Pan's Labyrinth, is I was like, "Oh, I have to read."
Yeah, it's in
Ooh.
Spanish. So yeah, obviously I got over that. But if this show has taught us anything, I got over that years ago. Um, but yeah, once again, this is a PSA for anyone out there before we end. Um, Getting over that hesitation of foreign language films, of reading subtitles, will unlock 90% of film. So
Yeah, I've tried a lot with like. I think my mom has seen a few, but I've been like, no, you got to see this one now. You got to do this one. You got to do that. Ashley doesn't want to do it, which I understand, even though we watch stuff with subtitles on anyway. But anyway, but well, everyone, we hope you enjoyed this episode on The Place Beyond the Pines, and we will see you next week for Pan's Labyrinth.